All right. Okay. All right, so now we're going to start on our chapter 3 stuff, which is not on the current test. This is the next test, but it will get here very fast. It's going to be right on the heels of the test that turns on tomorrow. Okay, so as soon as you finish homework and studying and taking the test, then jump right on this. No time to waste. Okay. So, and the notes are out there on the home page in case you didn't find them yet. If you didn't, don't spend time right now trying to write all this down. Because you know I'll post the notes after class, and so you can just print tonight's part of the notes with the stuff written in it already. So, if you don't have them right now. Okay, so, you know, so far when we've been working with the sets of numbers, it's been the set of real numbers, like the number line or the x-axis and y-axis. Real numbers that you can plot, that you can measure, that you can pay money with, real kind of numbers, right? Okay? But, you know, one of the bad kind of numbers that are impossible to work is when a negative gets under a square root sign. Okay, and so back in the history pages of math and mathematicians, different mathematicians around the world for a good many years were doing different problems and theories and stuff like that, you know, and getting a negative under there and having to just slam on brakes because they were like, there's no square root of a negative. And so at some point, like the three main mathematicians that were, you know, working on whatever kind of problems they were working on, where this was happening, came to an agreement that they would make up like a nickname, a symbol, to stand for the square root of -1. That's it, not the square root of negative anything else, but the square root of a -1. Now, they were not saying there's an answer for the square root of -1, because there's not. You know, none of these real numbers can multiply by itself to give you back that -1. So it's like a nickname. And so what they decided on was the letter I. Because when things aren't real, they are, good answer, okay, imaginary, right? So that is what the I stands for. It's an imaginary number. So it's the nickname of the square root of -1. And then, this is a two-part definition. When you square I, you have to get back what's underneath there. So I to the second gives you back real number -1. So you can at some point be in the imaginary land, but then if you do certain things, you can find your way out and back to the real number land. Okay? So, I is square root of -1, purely imaginary, not an answer, not a real number. But I squared brings you back to the real numbers. It's -1. Okay? Alrighty. And so, when we have some of these numbers and we want to simplify them, rewrite them with the I. Okay, what we're going to be doing each time, we're going to think of it as some square root times the square root of -1. Because that way I know this has the nickname of what? I. Okay? But I have to think about, well, what would the other be? So on this one, the square root of what number times the square root of a -1 would give me back the square root of -3. Right, it would have to be a 3 sitting under there, right? Square root of 3 times square root of -1 is square root of -3. Regular old multiplication under your square roots. Okay? Now, is there an exact square root of 3, like that we could change that to? No. Okay? Is this one of those that back in Algebra 2, you learned that you could break down and maybe pull something out and leave something under the square root? Is it one of those? No, it can't break down anymore. So we would just keep the square root of 3 times that I, and then we would write it, okay, either the square root of 3I, but you're making sure, if you write it that way, you are making sure that that I does not slip underneath that square root, because it already stands for the square root of, okay? Or you can, in order to not accidentally do that, you are allowed, like on homework and stuff, to write it up in front if it's one that is still hooked on a square root. So I would advise probably, writing it that way. So that would be expressing the number in terms of I. We took out that square root of the negative, and it became the I. So this one would be the square root of what times that square root of negative 1 that we know is I? 21. All right, this is going to get called what? Okay. Now, is there an exact square root of 21? No. Is it one that we can break down and maybe pull some square root out and have some square root left under? No. Because what's the only breakdown for a 21? What times what? Square root of 3 and a square root of 7, and neither one of those has a exact, right? But we always have to think that part through. So that's a no. So we just keep our square root of 21. And so either the square root of 21, I, or I'm just going to write it the other way to try to keep y'all doing it that way to stay out of trouble. So I own the square root of 21. Okay? So every time you see the negative beneath the square root symbol, it's going to come out and turn into an I. And then you've got whatever left there. Okay? So I'm just going to go ahead now and do that. What does that mean is left? The square root of 25. Does that have a perfect square root? And so, what would that answer be then right there? Right. Plain 5, not square root of 5. Okay, on number 4. Negatives underneath there, so there's my I. Square root of the positive 100, so what's that going to be? 10I. Okay? Plain 10. Okay? What do y'all think we're going to do on 7 and 8? It's got a negative out front and a negative underneath. Okay. Yeah, you cannot go, ooh, 2 negatives. 2 negatives always make a positive. Well, yeah, if they're back to back, but not if they've got this big square root sitting in between. So don't do that. Okay, if it's outside, you have to keep it outside while you figure out what to do about the rest. So now, for this, that negative is going to be my I. Square root of the positive 81 is going to be what? 9. So, what is that simplified going to be? What's that going to look like? Negative 9I. Yes. Okay, so what is the one over to the right, number 8, gonna be? Very good. Okay, now we got to where we can simplify them and pull some out and leave some under after we, rewrite the I part. So the square root of negative is going to give me my I. Now, what is that square root of 98 going to break into that will help us? That's 48, baby.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My brain's not working.
2 times 49.
Okay, so the square root of, I'm going to put the nice one up front, 49, times the square root of 2. Now, the square root of 49 is 7. Can you do anything with square root 2? So we just keep it. And then we've got the I. So, the way y'all could write it, like we were talking about earlier, 7I square root of 2. Unless you're going to be absolutely sure, without putting a space back there like when you're typing, to be absolutely sure that you're outside of that 2 before you do the I, just put it on the front. Better safe than sorry. All right, so what about the one over here? Y'all take a minute and see what's going to happen over there. Very good. Two I square root of 7. So any questions on any of those? Okay. Alrighty. Now, we could go through how to do the operations by hand, but you've got the I symbol on your calculator, so we might as well use it. It is right down there above your decimal point, so it's second decimal point to get just the I. And it actually puts the little I on your calculator. So I want you to try each of these 5, especially the division one at the end there, and be sure that you get these answers that are over there to the right. Take just a minute for that.